Cowboy was given a giant bride as a cruel prank, but her first words shocked him. They looked out for each other, celebrated together, and sometimes played harmless pranks on one another. Jack was well liked in this community. He wasn't famous or rich, but he was known for being kind, dependable, and with a good sense of humor. He had a warm smile that could make strangers feel welcome, and a calm, patient nature that made people trust him immediately. Jack had inherited a ranch from his father, who had passed away when Jack was still in his early 20s. The ranch was not very large, but it was enough to give Jack a simple and comfortable life. Every morning, he would rise before the sun, tend to the horses, feed the livestock, and work in the fields. He loved his routine and the feeling of peace that came with working on the land. He often said that the smell of hay and the sound of cows lowing was better than any music or city noise. People admired him for his dedication, but they also knew that he had a gentle side that made him easy to tease, especially among his friends. Jack's friends were a lively group. They had grown up together, spent summers riding horses and fishing in the nearby creek, and shared countless stories that had become town legends over the years. They loved him dearly, but they also loved a good joke. Jack, being kind and trusting, often found himself at the receiving end of these jokes. Sometimes he laughed with them. Other times he would shake his head, smiling but secretly wondering how they always managed to trick him. It had become a part of his life, a kind of harmless game that everyone enjoyed. One day, Jack's friends decided to plan a prank that they believed would be unforgettable. They wanted to surprise him with something completely unexpected, something so unusual that it would leave him speechless. After several cups of strong coffee and long discussions in the town's small cafe, they came up with an idea. They decided to gift Jack a bride. But this was no ordinary bride. She was to be a woman of extraordinary height and presence, someone who would completely shock Jack the moment he saw her. The friends laughed at the thought, imagining his reaction, picturing him frozen with surprise or running away in disbelief. They thought it would be harmless fun, a story that the town would talk about for months. What they did not fully consider, however, was the human impact of their prank. The night before the surprise, Jack went to bed like any other evening. He did not suspect anything unusual. He had finished his chores, fed the animals, and even mended a broken fence post that had bothered him for weeks. As he lay in bed, he thought about his life, the ranch, and the simple joys that came with it. He was content, though there was a part of him that wondered if he would ever find someone to share his life with. He had never been in a serious relationship. He often joked to himself that perhaps his true partner would appear one day as if sent by fate, someone who understood his quiet ways and shared his love for the land. Little did he know fate, or at least his friends, had a very unusual plan for him. The next morning, the friends gathered quietly at the local barn. They had chosen the barn because it was large, spacious, and offered the perfect place for their surprise. Everyone hid in different corners, peeking from behind wooden beams and stacks of hay, trying to control their laughter as they prepared for the big moment. They whispered among themselves, giving instructions to make sure everything went smoothly. "Remember, just wait for Jack to walk in. Don't laugh too early," said one of them. Another added, "Make sure she walks in slowly. We want to see the full reaction." There was an excited tension in the air, the kind that comes before something everyone believes will be both hilarious and unforgettable. Meanwhile, Jack had been invited to the barn by a friend under the pretense of helping with some important task that required his attention. He approached the barn with a mix of curiosity and mild nervousness. His boots kicked up little puffs of dust with every step. He imagined all sorts of scenarios, perhaps a new horse, or maybe even some rare equipment he had ordered for the ranch. But the idea of a surprise bride never crossed his mind. He had no reason to suspect anything unusual. He liked surprises, but he preferred them to be small, thoughtful things, not wild events that would leave him embarrassed. As he reached the barn, the sunlight poured through the gaps in the wooden walls, casting long, warm shadows on the ground. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath of the familiar scent of hay and wood. It was a smell he had grown up with, one that always brought comfort. Then, with a steady hand, he pushed open the large barn doors. The hinges creaked slightly, a sound he had heard countless times but that now seemed louder in the still morning. What happened next was something Jack could never have imagined. Standing at the center of the barn was a woman unlike any he had ever seen. She was tall, taller than anyone in the town, with a confident presence that immediately commanded attention. Her posture was perfect, her expression calm, and her eyes bright with intelligence and humor. She wore a simple dress, modest yet elegant, and there was a grace in the way she stood that made it clear she was fully aware of the impact of her presence. Jack froze. His mouth opened slightly, and for a moment he could not find words. He had expected a small joke, a funny face, or perhaps some harmless trick. But this was entirely different. He looked around, trying to find his friends, but they were hidden, barely able to contain their laughter as they peeked from behind the wooden beams. Jack's heart raced, a mix of surprise, confusion, and an unexpected curiosity. The woman, sensing the tension, smiled gently. She did not appear intimidated or uncomfortable. Instead, she spoke. Her voice was calm, melodic, and filled with warmth. "Hello," she said simply. "You must be Jack." There was a pause, just long enough for Jack to realize that her words were not mocking or teasing. They were genuine, polite, kind. She introduced herself as Amelia, and in that moment the energy in the barn began to shift. The prank that was supposed to humiliate Jack now had an entirely different effect. Jack blinked, trying to process what had just happened. He expected shock, maybe even embarrassment. But instead he felt something else, a spark of curiosity and perhaps a hint of admiration. He found himself drawn to her calm confidence, her gentle humor, and the unexpected intelligence in her eyes. His friends, hiding in the shadows, exchanged nervous glances. Their plan had gone far beyond what they intended. The joke that was supposed to leave Jack flustered and flailing now seemed almost irrelevant. The morning sun continued to shine through the barn, illuminating the space in a golden glow. Jack took a small step forward, then another, finally managing a polite smile. Amelia's eyes twinkled with quiet amusement, and her calm demeanor made Jack feel strangely at ease despite the bizarre situation. It was clear that this woman was not just tall or imposing. She was thoughtful, clever, and fully capable of navigating this strange encounter with grace. As Jack began to speak, trying to form coherent words, he realized something important. Life, he thought, had a way of surprising people in ways they never expected. What had begun as a simple, harmless prank had now turned into a moment that could change his life entirely. He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, knowing that the day ahead would be unlike any other he had experienced. The friends, who had gathered with laughter in mind, now watched in awe. They had not expected this reaction. The joke had taken on a life of its own, and the outcome was far beyond what they could have predicted. Jack and Amelia stood there, two people brought together by a strange twist of fate, neither knowing what the future held but both aware that this was the beginning of something remarkable. Jack could hardly believe what was happening. Just moments ago, he had been going about his usual day, feeding the animals and checking the fences, and now he was standing in a barn, facing a woman unlike anyone he had ever met. She was tall, confident, and calm, and her presence seemed to fill the entire space. Jack's friends, hidden behind the stacks of hay and wooden beams, were trying desperately not to laugh, but it was impossible. They had expected him to be shocked, maybe even flustered, but Jack was frozen in a completely different way. He was intrigued. Amelia, sensing his hesitation, stepped forward slightly. "It's okay," she said softly, her voice warm and steady. "I know this must be a surprise for you. I hope I haven't caused too much discomfort." She smiled, a gentle, friendly smile that made it clear she was not here to embarrass him, even if the situation seemed unusual. Jack blinked, unsure of what to say. He had expected confusion, maybe a little fear, but he did not expect kindness and humor. "Well, hello," Jack finally managed, his voice breaking slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again. I wasn't expecting this." He gestured vaguely toward her. "I mean, you." His words stumbled over each other, but Amelia's calm expression did not waver. Instead, she chuckled softly, a sound that was both pleasant and reassuring. "You don't have to be nervous," Amelia said. "I'm just a person like anyone else. I know my appearance might be surprising, but I promise I'm not here to scare you." Her words carried a light humor, but also sincerity, and Jack felt a strange sense of relief. He realized that the prank, which had been intended to embarrass him, was losing its power. Instead, he was beginning to see the woman standing before him not as a joke, but as a real person, someone with thoughts, feelings, and a personality all her own. Jack took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He studied Amelia more closely. She had bright eyes that seemed to look right into his thoughts, and there was a natural confidence in the way she carried herself. Her height, which had initially seemed intimidating, now felt almost impressive. There was a grace in the way she moved, a calmness in the way she spoke, and a warmth in her smile that made Jack feel unexpectedly comfortable. He realized with a start that his friend's prank had completely backfired. Amelia extended her hand politely. "I'm Amelia," she said. "It's very nice to meet you, Jack." Jack hesitated for only a moment before shaking her hand. Her grip was firm but gentle, and there was a quiet strength in her handshake that left an impression on him. He could sense immediately that she was not someone who would be easily intimidated, nor someone who would allow herself to be treated as a joke. "I'm Jack," he managed to say. "It's nice to meet you too." He smiled nervously, scratching the back of his neck. He glanced around, noticing his friends peeking from behind the hay. He felt a mix of embarrassment for them and gratitude that they had not ruined the moment entirely. Amelia, however, did not seem concerned at all about the prank. She seemed to have anticipated that something unusual might happen, and her calm reaction was grounding. The two of them began to talk. At first, the conversation was cautious, polite, and a little awkward. Jack asked simple questions about Amelia's life, where she was from, what she did, and how she had come to be in this town. Amelia answered thoughtfully, speaking with humor and clarity, sharing stories about her work, her hobbies, and the little adventures she had experienced in her life. Jack listened, fascinated, and for the first time he realized that there was so much more to a person than just appearances. Amelia's height, which had seemed like a spectacle, was simply one small part of who she was, and it mattered far less than the warmth and intelligence she exuded. Jack found himself laughing at her jokes, nodding at her insights, and genuinely enjoying the conversation. He could feel his nervousness fading, replaced by curiosity and admiration. Amelia, in turn, seemed genuinely interested in him. She asked questions about his ranch, the animals, and the work he did each day. Her questions were thoughtful, showing that she cared about his experiences and respected the life he had built for himself. Meanwhile, Jack's friends were beginning to feel a mix of emotions. They had planned this prank as a source of laughter, but now they were watching something entirely unexpected unfold. Their cruel joke had turned into a genuine connection between two people. They whispered to each other in disbelief, realizing that the story they had imagined would be funny was now becoming something meaningful. Some of them even felt a little guilty for attempting to manipulate the situation, but it was clear that Jack and Amelia were forming a bond that went beyond their prank. As the morning passed, Jack and Amelia continued to talk. They discovered shared interests. Both loved animals, enjoyed the outdoors, and appreciated simple pleasures like a quiet morning with coffee or a long walk through the fields. They exchanged stories from their childhood, laughed at small mishaps, and marveled at the coincidences in their lives. Each moment seemed to strengthen their connection, and Jack began to feel a sense of comfort he had not known before. He realized that Amelia's presence was not intimidating or overwhelming. Instead, it was inspiring. She had a confidence and warmth that made him want to be his best self. At one point, Amelia mentioned that she had grown up in a nearby town, where she had often faced teasing for her height. She explained that while people sometimes judged her based on her appearance, she had learned to focus on her own strengths and to approach life with humor and grace. Jack listened intently, realizing how much courage it must have taken for her to remain so calm and composed, especially in such a strange situation. He admired her resilience and began to understand that the prank, though intended to embarrass him, had actually revealed something remarkable about Amelia's character. Jack felt a shift within himself. Where he had initially been nervous, unsure, and even a little intimidated, he now felt intrigued, respectful, and drawn to Amelia's personality. The prank that was supposed to create laughter at his expense had become irrelevant. What mattered was the connection he was forming with this woman, someone who could challenge him, make him laugh, and perhaps even change his perspective on life. The friends, now cautiously observing from the shadows, were struck by the transformation in Jack. They had expected shock and embarrassment, but instead, they saw fascination, curiosity, and even admiration. Their plan, which had been crafted with mischief in mind, had unexpectedly created an opportunity for something beautiful to begin. Some of them felt a pang of guilt for attempting to manipulate Jack's feelings, but they also couldn't deny the joy of witnessing a genuine human connection forming right before their eyes. As the conversation continued, Jack began to ask Amelia about her dreams and aspirations. She spoke openly, sharing her desire to travel, to experience new cultures, and to make a positive impact in her community. She spoke with passion and clarity, and Jack realized how rare it was to meet someone who was both confident and kind, someone who could hold her own while remaining thoughtful and compassionate. He found himself listening intently, wanting to know more, and appreciating the way she viewed the world. Amelia, in turn, asked Jack about his life on the ranch. She wanted to know about his daily routines, the challenges he faced, and the joys he experienced working with animals. Jack shared stories about the mischievous horses, the stubborn cows, and the quiet moments that made life on the ranch meaningful. He spoke with pride and love for the life he had built, and Amelia listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed her intelligence and curiosity. By midday, the initial tension had completely disappeared. What had begun as a prank, designed to shock and embarrass, had transformed into a meaningful conversation between two people who were discovering mutual respect and admiration. Jack felt a sense of excitement and possibility, realizing that this encounter might be the beginning of something far more important than he had ever imagined. Amelia, too, seemed engaged and intrigued, her calm demeanor giving way to subtle smiles and thoughtful responses. Jack's friends eventually realized that the prank had reached its peak. The laughter they had anticipated was replaced by awe and a quiet recognition that something extraordinary was happening. They slowly stepped out from behind the hay, unsure of how to react. They had planned to control the moment, but now they simply observed, witnessing a connection that had grown naturally, beyond their manipulation. They felt a mixture of pride, guilt, and amazement, understanding that life often had a way of turning even the most mischievous plans into moments of genuine beauty. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light across the barn, Jack and Amelia continued to talk. They shared small jokes, thoughtful reflections, and quiet observations about life. Each word, each smile, and each glance seemed to deepen their understanding of one another. Jack felt a sense of hope and excitement he had never experienced before, while Amelia demonstrated the intelligence, humor, and kindness that made her presence so compelling. By the time the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across the barn floor, Jack realized that the day had been unlike any other. What had started as a cruel prank had become an opportunity for discovery, connection, and perhaps even the beginning of a relationship. The experience taught him that appearances could be misleading, that humor could transform into understanding, and that life was full of surprises, often when least expected. Jack left the barn that evening with a sense of wonder and anticipation. He knew that the encounter with Amelia would stay with him for a long time, shaping his thoughts and emotions in ways he could not yet fully understand. The prank, though intended to create laughter at his expense, had unexpectedly brought him face to face with someone remarkable. He could not wait to learn more about her, to continue their conversations, and to explore the possibilities that had opened up with her arrival. After their first meeting, Jack found it difficult to stop thinking about Amelia. Her calm confidence and warm presence had left a lasting impression on him, and he realized that what had begun as a prank had transformed into something far more meaningful. The barn, once a place of mischief, had become the backdrop of an unexpected connection, and Jack couldn't help but feel that his life was about to change in ways he could not have imagined. The next morning, Jack woke early as usual, tending to his chores with a sense of anticipation. Normally, he moved through his routine methodically, feeding the animals, checking fences, and making sure the ranch ran smoothly. But today, there was a lightness in his step, a quiet excitement that colored even the simplest tasks. He found himself glancing toward the road, wondering if Amelia might stop by, and imagining the conversations they could have. The thought brought a smile to his face, one that lingered long after he finished his morning work. Amelia, meanwhile, had returned to her own life, but she too found herself thinking about Jack. She reflected on the first meeting in the barn, noting how genuine and kind he was, despite the absurd circumstances. She admired his patience, his humor, and the quiet strength that came from a life dedicated to hard work and responsibility. The prank that had brought them together was irrelevant now. What mattered was the person behind the initial surprise, the man whose eyes showed curiosity and respect. She realized that their encounter was rare, a meeting of two people who could understand and appreciate one another beyond appearances. A few days later, Amelia decided to visit the ranch. She wanted to see where Jack worked, to understand his world, and to continue the conversation they had begun in the barn. Jack was nervous but excited when he saw her walking toward the property. Her presence was commanding yet gentle, and the animals seemed to sense her calm demeanor, moving quietly around her. Jack greeted her warmly, and they began a tour of the ranch together. They walked among the horses, watching them graze and play. Jack explained each horse's personality, sharing stories about how they had arrived at the ranch and the little quirks that made them special. Amelia listened attentively, asking questions that revealed both her curiosity and her appreciation for the work Jack did. She laughed at his humorous stories, and sometimes she even offered advice or observations that were insightful and unexpected. Jack found himself impressed by her intelligence and thoughtfulness, realizing that she was far more than the tall woman he had initially met. She was a person with depth, warmth, and a lively mind that could match his own. During the tour, they came across the vegetable garden that Jack had planted. Rows of tomatoes, carrots, and herbs stretched across the land, and Amelia admired the careful work he had put into it. "You've created something wonderful here," she said, touching the leaves gently. "It's not just a garden. It's a place where life thrives, and that takes patience and care." Jack felt a sense of pride in her words, realizing that she saw more than just the physical effort. She appreciated the heart and dedication behind it. He explained the techniques he used, sharing small tips and tricks, and Amelia listened intently, asking questions and making thoughtful suggestions. As they continued to explore the ranch, they found themselves talking about their lives beyond the land. Jack shared stories from his childhood, the adventures he had with friends, and the lessons he had learned growing up in the small town. Amelia shared her own experiences, including the challenges she had faced due to her height, and the ways she had learned to approach life with humor and resilience. They laughed at some of the absurd situations they had both encountered, and they found comfort in the fact that they could share their vulnerabilities without judgment. One of the most memorable moments came when they reached the creek that ran along the edge of the property. The water was clear and cold, flowing over smooth stones, and the sound was soothing. Jack had often come here to think, to find peace, and to enjoy the quiet beauty of nature. Amelia walked along the edge carefully, dipping her hand into the water. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "It feels like a place where you can breathe and forget the world for a while." Jack nodded, feeling that she understood something fundamental about his life. They sat together on a large rock, talking quietly, sharing dreams and imagining the future. Throughout the day, Jack realized that the prank from the barn had become almost irrelevant. The initial shock of Amelia's presence had faded, replaced by genuine admiration and interest. He saw her not as a joke or a spectacle, but as a person with thoughts, feelings, and a remarkable character. Amelia, too, seemed to enjoy the genuine connection they were forming. She laughed easily, listened attentively, and shared her insights thoughtfully. Both of them felt an ease in each other's company that was rare and precious. As the afternoon turned to evening, Jack and Amelia found themselves discussing the future. They talked about dreams, ambitions, and the kind of life they wanted to lead. Jack shared his desire to maintain the ranch, to care for the animals, and to live a life that was meaningful and grounded in nature. Amelia spoke about her hopes for travel, for learning, and for making a positive impact in her community. They discovered that their values aligned in many ways, that both of them cared deeply about honesty, kindness, and meaningful work. The friends who had orchestrated the prank watched from a distance, quietly amazed at what was unfolding. They had expected laughter, maybe embarrassment, but instead, they witnessed a genuine connection growing before their eyes. Some of them felt a little guilty for having set the situation in motion, realizing that their joke had unintentionally created something extraordinary. They whispered to each other, acknowledging that sometimes life had a way of surprising even the most mischievous plans. As the sun set, casting a warm orange glow across the fields, Jack and Amelia returned to the ranch house. They shared a simple meal together, laughing over small mishaps in the kitchen and enjoying each other's company. Jack found himself opening up more than he had in years, sharing thoughts and feelings he had kept to himself. Amelia, in turn, shared her experiences, showing vulnerability and trust. The bond between them deepened with each conversation, each smile, and each shared experience. By the end of the evening, both Jack and Amelia realized that what had started as a shocking and unusual encounter had grown into something meaningful. They had discovered mutual respect, admiration, and a growing fondness that neither had anticipated. The prank that was meant to create embarrassment had instead created an opportunity for understanding, laughter, and genuine human connection. In the days that followed, Jack and Amelia continued to spend time together. They worked on small projects around the ranch, shared meals, and explored the surrounding countryside. Each moment brought new insights, deeper understanding, and an appreciation for each other's character. Jack found himself inspired by Amelia's intelligence, kindness, and humor, while Amelia admired Jack's dedication, patience, and gentle nature. The friends who had planned the prank eventually joined in, witnessing the growing bond between Jack and Amelia. They realized that their joke had taken on a life of its own, far beyond what they had imagined. What was meant to be a moment of laughter had become a catalyst for something beautiful and lasting. They felt a mixture of pride and relief, knowing that the prank had not caused harm but had instead brought two people together in a meaningful way. As the weeks passed, Jack and Amelia's relationship continued to flourish. They learned more about each other, supported one another, and discovered shared dreams and values. The initial shock of their meeting faded into a memory, replaced by the joy and excitement of discovering someone truly remarkable. Jack realized that life was unpredictable, that surprises could come in the most unexpected forms, and that the true measure of a person went far beyond appearances. Amelia, too, reflected on the unexpected turn of events. She had faced many challenges in her life, but the kindness, curiosity, and openness she encountered in Jack made her feel seen and appreciated. Their connection was built on more than just attraction. It was founded on respect, understanding, and shared values. Both of them understood that the prank from the barn had been only the beginning, a strange twist that had brought them together, but had no bearing on the depth of the bond they were now forming. By the end of Part 3, Jack and Amelia had reached a point where their relationship could no longer be defined by the initial prank. They had discovered a genuine connection, built on mutual respect, shared interests, and a growing admiration for one another. What had begun as a shocking and unusual encounter had evolved into a meaningful relationship, one that neither Jack nor Amelia could have anticipated but both now cherished. He had always believed in the value of hard work, honesty, and simple pleasures, but he realized that life also had a way of surprising people in ways they could never plan. Amelia had become one of those surprises, a presence that had entered his life and made it richer, fuller, and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. Amelia had settled into life on the ranch with a natural ease. She enjoyed helping Jack with the daily chores, learning about the animals, and exploring the wide open fields that stretched for miles around the property. At first, some of the neighbors and townspeople had been curious about her presence, knowing the story of the prank that had brought her to the barn. They had expected awkwardness, embarrassment, or perhaps some tension, but what they saw instead was harmony. Amelia had a gentle way of connecting with the animals, calming the horses with a few soft words, and showing care and patience that reminded everyone of Jack's own approach to life. Jack, for his part, found that he had grown in ways he had not anticipated. He had always been confident in his work and his daily routine, but Amelia's presence challenged him to think differently, to approach life with more openness and creativity. They spent hours talking about their dreams, sharing small ideas for the future, and imagining new adventures together. Jack found himself laughing more freely, thinking more deeply, and appreciating the little moments of life that had always been important to him, but now felt even more precious. The prank that had started it all had long since faded from importance. The friends who had orchestrated it were initially worried about how it would be remembered, but they too had witnessed the extraordinary connection forming between Jack and Amelia. The laughter that was intended to come from embarrassment had been replaced with admiration. They began to see that their plan, though mischievous, had somehow created an opportunity for two people to discover each other in a meaningful way. They felt relief and joy, knowing that the outcome had been far better than they could have imagined. One day, Amelia and Jack decided to host a small gathering at the ranch to celebrate the changing seasons. They invited their friends, neighbors, and members of the community who had watched the story unfold with curiosity. The barn, once the setting of a prank, was now decorated with lights, flowers, and handmade decorations. There was music, laughter, and an air of genuine warmth that reflected the bond Jack and Amelia shared. Everyone could see the happiness in their eyes, the respect in their gestures, and the joy in their laughter. During the gathering, Jack took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. He remembered the first meeting, when Amelia had walked into the barn and spoken her first words with calm confidence. He recalled the shock he had felt, the awkwardness, and the tension. But now none of that mattered. What mattered was the connection they had built, the mutual understanding and admiration, and the genuine love that had grown between them. He felt grateful, not only for Amelia, but also for the unexpected turns that life had taken to bring them together. Amelia noticed Jack's thoughtful expression and gently took his hand. "You've been quiet," she said with a soft smile. "What are you thinking about?" Jack looked into her eyes, feeling the warmth and sincerity that had drawn him to her from the beginning. "I was just thinking about how strange life can be," he said. "How something that seems like a joke, a prank, can turn into something so important, so meaningful." Amelia laughed lightly, squeezing his hand. "It's true," she said. "Sometimes life surprises us in ways we can't predict, and sometimes those surprises are the best things that ever happened to us." They discussed the possibility of traveling together, exploring new places and sharing experiences that would strengthen their bond even further. Every plan, every idea was discussed with excitement and care, reflecting the deep respect and trust they had developed. They were partners not just in life, but in thought, laughter, and ambition. Their friends watched with admiration, realizing that their prank had inadvertently created something beautiful. What had begun as a joke intended to shock and embarrass had become a celebration of love, trust, and the power of human connection. The community, too, began to see Jack and Amelia not as subjects of a prank, but as a couple whose relationship was genuine and inspiring. People admired the way they supported each other, how they laughed together, and the simple kindness they extended to everyone around them. As the evening progressed, Jack and Amelia stood together on the porch, looking out at the fields bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, reflecting the warmth and beauty of the life they were building together. Jack felt a deep sense of contentment. He realized that the prank, once a source of nervousness and uncertainty, had led him to a connection he might never have experienced otherwise. Amelia had become his companion, his confidant, and his inspiration. Amelia leaned her head gently on Jack's shoulder. "I never expected my first visit here to turn into something like this," she said softly. Jack smiled, feeling the truth of her words. "Neither did I," he admitted, "but I'm glad it did. You've changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined." Amelia lifted her head, looking into his eyes. "And you've changed mine," she said. "We've both grown, learned, and discovered something valuable, something that matters far more than appearances or first impressions." Jack and Amelia were invited to speak at community events, share their experiences, and even help mediate conflicts, using their story as an example of how humor, understanding, and kindness could lead to meaningful outcomes. Over time, Jack and Amelia continued to grow together. They worked side by side on the ranch, shared responsibilities, and celebrated successes and small victories. Their bond deepened through daily life, the quiet mornings, the shared chores, and the moments of laughter and reflection. They supported each other's dreams, encouraged each other during challenges, and celebrated the simple joys that life offered. Their love was not flashy or dramatic. It was steady, meaningful, and grounded in respect and understanding. The friends who had initially planned the prank sometimes joked about it, but even they acknowledged that it had led to something extraordinary. They no longer saw the prank as cruel. Instead, it was a story that had brought people together, taught lessons about kindness and respect, and created a connection that might never have happened otherwise. They felt proud, in a quiet way, to have played a small part in a story that had a happy ending for everyone involved. Jack and Amelia's life together was marked by simplicity and joy. They spent weekends exploring nearby forests, hosting neighbors for meals, and caring for the animals on the ranch. They celebrated holidays and special occasions with warmth and laughter, always remembering the strange and unexpected beginnings of their relationship. The prank that had once seemed shocking and cruel became a distant memory, replaced by countless moments of shared happiness, trust, and love. One day, as they worked together in the garden, Jack paused to look at Amelia. He noticed the way the sunlight caught her hair, the gentle curve of her smile, and the warmth in her eyes. He felt a deep gratitude for the unexpected twist of fate that had brought her into his life. "I'm glad you're here," he said simply. Amelia smiled, her eyes shining. "Me too," she replied. "Every day feels brighter, better, and more meaningful because of this, because of us." It showed that first impressions could be misleading, that humor could transform into deep respect, and that genuine connection could grow from even the most unexpected beginnings. The couple's life together was a testament to the power of kindness, patience, and the willingness to see beyond appearances. Jack and Amelia continued to live happily on the ranch, building a life filled with laughter, love, and shared purpose. The barn, once the site of a shocking prank, became a symbol of new beginnings and unexpected joy. Their story spread throughout the community, inspiring others to look for the extraordinary in the ordinary and to embrace life's surprises with an open heart. What had begun as a cruel joke had evolved into a remarkable journey of discovery, connection, and enduring love, reminding everyone that life's most meaningful moments often come when least expected.